dream of nearly every fighter to one day make their UFC debut, with fans eager to see how stars from other promotions will fare in the Octagon's hallowed walls. But for some notable names, this moment came a touch earlier than many remember. Today, we look at the fighters who competed for the promotion early in their career, only to leave for pastures new before returning as a bona fide megastar. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 forgotten early UFC tenures. When the UFC bought Pride in 2007, Wanderlei Silva was one of its highest profile acquisitions, having embarked on a reign of terror that saw him become one of the promotion's most feared fighters. However, 2007 wasn't the first time the Brazilian set foot in the Octagon. Silva first made his MMA debut in 1996, competing in Vale Tudo events in his native Brazil. After a 5-1 record, the 22-year-old was given the call to compete in the UFC's first event in Brazil, taking on fellow youngster and future legend Vitor Belfort. Surprisingly, Vitor made the decision to wear boots for the bout, meaning he wouldn't be allowed to kick his opponent at any point during the match. But who needs feet when you've got lightning-quick hands?
Oh, he does with the hands though! Vitor Belfort is the winner!
Silva spent the next 2 years splitting time between Pride, Vale Tudo, and further appearances in the UFC, making amends for his Vitor loss in a dominant display over journeyman Tony Pitara. This led to Silva earning a title shot at UFC 25, taking on rising star Tito Ortiz for the vacant light heavyweight crown. While Silva enjoyed moments of success, he posed little answer to Ortiz's wrestling game, and was even dropped by the Huntington Beach fighter early in the second round. While the UFC expressed interest in retaining Silva's services, the Brazilian found the bigger paychecks in Pride too hard to turn down, and by the end of 2000, committed his future to competing in Japan. It would prove a wise decision, as Silva's aggressive yet maturing game saw him become an icon in the Far East, becoming the company's first middleweight champion before breaking the record for most wins and title defenses in company history. Dan Henderson was another Pride veteran who made a brief foray into the UFC's early years, but the man that first graced the promotion was a very different beast. Henderson was no stranger to combat sport when he first made his UFC bow, an NCAA All-American and 2-time Olympian in Greco-Roman wrestling, before transitioning to MMA after seeing the success of Olympic teammate Mark Coleman. After winning his first 2 fights, Hendo was invited to compete in the UFC 17 middleweight tournament against Alan Goes. Contrary to the style he became synonymous with, Henderson appeared noticeably nervous in the stand-up exchanges, even being dropped by the BJJ black belt before slowly building his confidence on way to a controversial decision. This booked Henderson a spot in the final and a match against future welterweight champion Carlos Newton. Henderson would land big knees and overhands early in the fight, but his poor cardio left him vulnerable to Newton, who dropped the American multiple times in the later stages. Henderson held on to claim another decision and the middleweight crown for himself. Some consider Henderson one of the few Grand Slam champions in MMA history, with his tournament crown joining future titles in Pride and Strikeforce. Henderson won a further tournament in rings before arriving on Pride's shores in 2000. Enjoying a successful run which saw his striking soon match his already elite wrestling, by the time the fighter returned to the Octagon in 2007, Decision Dan was a thing of the past. Before becoming the UFC's bad guy, Chel Sunen was simply a guy. Sunen was a credentialed college wrestler who'd spent his early years competing in regional promotions around the world, alternating between one-sided decisions or being submitted in matches he was comfortably winning, including a loss to future UFC champion Forrest Griffin. A 15-6 record was enough to earn Sunen a contract with the UFC, taking on former rival Babalu Sobral at UFC 55. Sunen had beaten the Brazilian during their first meeting in 2005, but the future title challenger made the most of his second chance to catch the bad guy in a triangle choke. Rematches would be a key part of Sunen's first tenure, avenging his first career loss to Trevor Prangley before facing veteran fighter Jeremy Horn at UFC 60, a man Sunen had previously lost to twice on the regional scene. Sunen seemed on the way to make amends with an immediate takedown and actively peppering Horn with shots from the top, until Horn's potent submission game made itself known early in the second. It wouldn't be the last time Sunen lost a crucial encounter, having dominated the match from the top. A 1-2 record wasn't enough to save Sunen from the UFC axe, being released from the promotion shortly after and being forced to rebuild his career with Bodog in the WEC. 7 wins from his next 8 fights helped repair Sunen's standing among fans, and backed by a newfound trash-talking persona, led the fighter back to the UFC in 2009, thus ending the origin story of MMA's greatest villain.
Tito always says I'm using my mouth to get my opportunities. The only person I know that made money using their mouth is his ex-wife.
Long before the triangle that transformed his career, many felt Fabricio Verdum had missed his chance to be a UFC star. Verdum was one of the lower-profile acquisitions from the Pride UFC merger. While a win over a pre-horsemeat Alistair Overeem raised his standing among hardcores, the Brazilian was often overshadowed by fellow jiu-jitsu ace Minotauro Nogueira, who handed Verdum his last loss before joining the promotion. The UFC, however, thought enough of Verdum to give him a co-main slot for his company debut, taking on former champion Andrei Arlovski at UFC 70. Verdum quickly rebounded with wins over Gabriel Gonzaga and Brendan Vera, with all of his matches coincidentally taking place in the UK. Verdum's American bow wouldn't come until UFC 90, when he was chosen as the first opponent for company newcomer Junior Dos Santos. While Dos Santos entered the match with 6 first-round finishes, most believed Verdum's experience and grappling base would be too much for the 24-year-old. It took just 80 seconds for Dos Santos to answer the skeptics. Dos Santos' win was one of the biggest upsets of the year, propelling the Brazilian to the top band of the heavyweights at the expense of his compatriot. The loss came at the worst possible time for Verdum. The fighter was in negotiations with the UFC over a new contract, and when Verdum turned down their first offer, the company parted ways with him at the end of the year, with Verdum only finding out about his release when rumors began spreading on social media. Verdum's contract was quickly picked up by Strikeforce, making few inroads before accepting a match with MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko. Verdum submitted the Russian in one of the biggest upsets in the sport's history, reinvigorating his career and leading to a UFC return in 2011. Verdum carried his momentum to a 6-fight winning streak that culminated in a heavyweight title win at UFC 188, 7 years after the company deemed him surplus to requirements. When Josh Thompson joined the UFC in 2013, he immediately became one of the company's best lightweights, a status he had already held 9 years earlier. Thompson first entered MMA after an acclaimed wrestling career in college, going unbeaten in his first 6 fights, including the American debut of legend Kid Yamamoto. Thompson's record earned him a UFC call against fellow newcomer Gerald Strebend, taking less than a round to finish the Eddie Bravo black belt. Strebend would leave the promotion shortly after, before being arrested for negligent homicide and the sexual assault of an underage girl. Thompson faced yet another scumbag in his sophomore outing with Hermes Franca, getting the upper hand of a wild fight that saw Thompson nearly stopped early in the 3rd round. This led Thompson to a match with Eve Edwards at UFC 49. While the UFC had put their lightweight title on hold, many believed the winner of the match would be considered the company's top 155er. Fully aware of Edwards' striking, Thompson knew that he needed to go grappling if he wanted to get the best of his veteran opponent, but his attempt to do so ended in spectacular fashion.
Big head kick! Down goes Thompson!
The head kick marked the first loss of Thompson's MMA career, and while the UFC still thought highly enough of him to offer more fights, the strong talent pool and bigger paychecks saw him leave the promotion in 2004, enjoying a one-off appearance in Pride before signing with Strikeforce. It was there that Thompson came of age, becoming one of the company's top lightweights and claiming the division's title in a win over Gilbert Melendez, making him the only man to beat El Nino in his time with the promotion. Thompson eventually returned to the UFC following Strikeforce's absorption in 2013. While a 1-3 record did fall short of expectations, it did see the Punk become the only man to knock out Nate Diaz, a match fans of Stockton's finest would want you to forget.
And it is all over! Josh Thompson with the victory!
And now, time for a few honorable mentions. Before returning to the promotion as a two-weight champion, David Branch was known for being on the wrong end of Rousimar Palhares and Gerald Harris's highlight reels.
Oh, he's out. He's out. It is all over.
Anthony Smith fought 27 times before his first UFC match. A first-round loss to Antonio Neto meant it would be another 3 before his second. Angela Hill made up for a 2-fight run in 2015 by fighting pretty much every week since she came back. This is the INC. Please like, share, and subscribe. Post your feedback in the comments and donate to our Patreon page for hours of exclusive content.